Your Misinformation is part of the Demcast family of podcasts. What's up, everybody? I'm Katie.
And I'm Morgan.
And this is For Your Misinformation, a podcast dedicated to empowering women to be more politically engaged so we can act in our own best interests.
Let us break down the problem and tell you what we're doing and what you can do to help solve it.
Well, hi, Katie.
Hi, Morgan.
How are you?
I'm really good. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I am excited, extremely excited. Katie, do you want to tell everybody why?
I would love to. So we have with us today Lyz Lenz, who is an author. I just finished reading her new book, Belabored. I also read Godland last week, and both were excellent. I cannot wait to talk about it. You have like your own reasons for being excited to talk to her. There's a lot to cover. We want to talk shit about Kim Reynolds. There's just a lot to do. So, I don't know. I guess let's just bring Lyz on. Hi, Lyz, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. And I know we were supposed to do this earlier, but then a giant inland hurricane came and wrecked my town and my house, and so we rescheduled. So I appreciate your flexibility.
Oh gosh, we appreciate you. Yeah. So I guess maybe first things first, how are you doing after all of that devastation in Cedar Rapids?
I mean, I want to tell you the Midwestern thing of I'm fine because, like, you know, I have power back on at my house. I got it back after 10 days without it. And there's still many people who don't have power. So I have air conditioning. I can make myself an egg sandwich. You can't stop me. I can read books at night now. But, you know, but also there's trees down everywhere and power lines everywhere and people who are still homeless. And now there's an unchecked pandemic running rampant through my state. But you want to know what? I've got whiskey, so I'm doing great. Just great.
Yes, the ultimate fix. Just whiskey on
yeah,
top of
I mean,
everything.
that's just going to solve everything at this point because literally nobody else is doing anything about it. So
Right.
yeah,
It's not going to make it worse. We know that.
Better. That's right.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we like you a lot, and we were aware of you prior to just because we're both Midwesterners. I'm in Iowa, and we became official fans of yours after you were on stage at Love It or Leave It in Iowa City back in January. That had to be so much fun. It looked like fun.
It was so much fun. I was so excited because I'm a huge fan of the podcast. And then when they asked to have me on, it was like, oh my God, and now what am I going to wear? And yeah, it was tons of fun. I'm a little sad I didn't get to do, the monologue speechy thing that they let you do, right? Like at the end, like I came in, like I was like prepared. And then I understand why they didn't, like, none of us were professional comedians, and we had two politicians on the stage, and you never want to let them talk too long.
This is true.
True. I mean, even if you like them, you still always just have to shut them up every once in a while. But that was truly so fun, and I can't believe that was just wasn't that in February? It was
like the last day of January or early February, right before the
last
caucuses.
day of January.
Yeah, which like simple times, man.
I know. Do you remember? Like that was like my biggest worry was what dress should I wear on stage? Yeah. Like,
Yeah, it's like I would love to go back.
And now I'm like. Yeah. And now I'm like, what outfit do I wear to cover a natural disaster and a pandemic? Yeah. Like, those are my clothing choices.
Right. What do you wear for the end of democracy?
I mean, the answer is just like some Madewell jeans and an old T-shirt and a mask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, no bra. Just don't. Why bother?
Well. Can we discuss how, like, I was working so happy out of my home, no bras, very few pants, living the dream. And then this natural disaster hits. I don't have internet at my house. I have to go into work, and work is now a warehouse because we're moving offices because we had to downsize because of the pandemic, and we're an independent newspaper. And so now all of a sudden, in the middle of all this, I have to like wash my hair and look decent for my coworkers. And I'm like, I can't look. This is too much.
Yeah.
It's too much.
I
It
think you
is.
should
It's
get
too
a
much.
pass. You should.
I had to wear a bra. I had to wear an underwire bra for the past 2 weeks. And look, I mean, I know we're all in pain, but please pour one out for my pain of having to wear a bra. I was like, this thing doesn't fit. And then my friend's like, no, that's exactly how it's supposed to fit.
Yeah, I had to go to the office for me to I was only without power for 3 days in Des Moines, but and when I went to go in and I had to put a bra on, I was like, oh my God, I don't even know the last time I washed this. And now I'm going to put it on my body, and it's just been sitting in a drawer, like probably molding. Oh God.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely molding in your temperature controlled drawer inside your home for sure.
Yeah.
I like
drawer.
I know, like moths fly out.
Yeah.
They've turned into skeletons. Well, how did a bra turn into a skeleton? I don't know. But yeah, no, it's, and I think I used to, before pandemic, I was a person who always put on makeup because I was raised by like a Southern woman. And, you know, she's like, no, makeup, you need to, you know, and there's just like part of that stays with you. And pandemic has hit, and I'm like, I can't even find my mascara, and it's probably too old to put in my eyes. I don't know where my eyeliner is. I don't know where anything is. And so I've been going out, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not wearing makeup at all. And nobody's looking at me and asking me if I'm tired or if I'm 78, because we're all tired and we all look 78. So that's my beauty routine, is just crying myself to sleep at night.
Yeah, and thank God for the masks, though, too, because it covers up at least half of like that whole mess. That's my face.
Okay, but here's the real tragedy. So, turns out if you're writing and reporting on the devastation, and I know we're making jokes, but like it really has sucked here in town. And, you know, just to go out and hear people's stories, and, you know, and not only reporting, but I've also been trying to volunteer, and, you know, because this is my home and these are my neighbors, and then having to like move my kids from my home to a hotel, and then trying to figure out what to do with them while I work because they don't have power or internet, you know, it's just like a mess. And in the middle of all this, I get two very big stress zits, neither which are inside of the mask zone.
Oh no.
That's not fair.
No. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, why does the injustice continue? This is clearly Donald Trump's fault.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I feel like the real natural disaster, these whole almost 14 days now, has just been my actual face.
Well, I mean, I guess maybe it's just like fitting for 2020. I mean, shoot, like February, we had the caucuses, and now the pandemic and the embarrassingly adequate response to that across the nation. But I mean, in Iowa in particular. And now we've had an inland hurricane. This has just been a bad year.
I mean, no, and actually right after the storm, I was walking outside with my daughter, and, you know, I told her, I was like, come with me, we're going to walk up, because I live right near the main First Avenue that runs through town. I don't live very far from there. So I grab her, and I'm like, okay, like, this is part of my job. We're just going to scope things out. So come with me. So we're walking up to First Avenue just to kind of see how bad everything is. And this woman is also walking down First Avenue, and she's just like, she's drenched from the rain. I don't know where she's been. She's carrying a plastic bag of something. She looks at me and she goes, well, I don't think it can get any worse. And I looked at her and I go, ma'am, don't you dare say that. Don't you fucking dare say that, because it will get worse. And God bless her, because she laughed. Like, she didn't get mad at me, which she easily could have, because a stranger swore at her for no reason. But yeah, I just was like, don't, nobody say that. Nobody say it can't get worse, because that's when you call in the literal zombies.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, also, like, does she not remember that there's an election in November? Like, that very much is part of 2020, and we don't know how that's going to go. So,
right.
Yeah, that's inviting some
exactly.
scary stuff.
Yeah, and I think that people who aren't concerned about the election really need to wake up and prepare themselves, because I remember in the beginning of the year when there was some talk about Trump wanting to mess with the Postal Service, and I clearly, distinctly remember people saying, oh, that's not going to happen. Oh, that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. They won't know. That's like, don't be so cynical. And now it's happening, and it's happening in a particularly brazen way. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're so bad at crimes. Yeah. Like, they just do them. And then it's like my theory in college. I was like, you can steal anything from a college, like, please, yes, did I do this? Absolutely. But I was like, right, I would joke with my friends. I'd be like, as long as you look like you're supposed to be doing it, nobody will question you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's so how we like stole furniture and like a lot of plants. Don't arrest me. It's the statute of limitations is expired. But yeah, as long as you act like you're supposed to be doing it, then people will be like, oh, well, okay. But yes. And so it is going to get a little worse. And I do believe we'll survive. I believe democracy will prevail, but then we have a Biden administration. So no rest for the weary.
Right. We have our work cut out for us no matter what.
Right. Right.
So, okay. So as a journalist, I feel like you probably have better radar than most people, but how does this year, like, pandemic notwithstanding, feel different from like 2016 or even 2012? Does it feel different?
Oh, absolutely. I think, and it's so hard to speak so broadly, but I think people are more on edge. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, people are more raw. People are more, the conspiracy theories in 2016 that went around, about like Hillary Clinton and everything, like those were, they were still very powerful, for the aging Facebook voting demographic, which is huge. Mm-hmm. But they weren't likely to get your grandma killed. And now all the COVID conspiracy stuff going around is gonna get your grandma killed, mm-hmm. right? Like, and so I feel like whatever the stakes were in 2016, they're that much higher. And I think a lot of people, and I do not live in a liberal bubble. Besides Iowa City, I don't think anywhere in Iowa is a liberal bubble. No. Maybe like one small part in Des Moines. I don't know Des Moines very well, but I don't even think y'all have a liberal bubble there either. So, so much of what happened in 2016 took people by surprise. And I feel like in 2020, we're not surprised. We're just exhausted. We're tired. I think people are getting beat down, and that's the point, right? Mm-hmm. You're supposed to feel beat down and powerless. Yeah. So that I think is the difference. And again, the stakes are so much higher. 170,000 people are dead from this pandemic, mm-hmm. And more will happen. Mm-hmm. And even if we do change administrations, more still will happen, and they didn't have to. And I think that's the thing we just have to keep remembering. And it's hard to remember, I think, especially when we're all in our disaster bubbles. But, there's wildfires in California that are devastating. There's hurricanes and tropical storms heading for the East Coast. Like, we're all going through it. But I think, one, remembering to wear a mask, and two, I just think that the compounding of the disaster and trauma in this year has been particularly bad.
Yeah.
And we're feeling it. And people who were able to ignore it before in 2016 are not able to ignore it now.
Yeah. And that was just the raw emotions of it all is crazy. But
Iowans are so on edge. I saw a fist fight right in front of my street right after the storm calmed down.
Gosh.
And I mean, that's not Iowa. And and I have heard more people, I was scared to get gas a week and a half ago, because I had to sit in line because one place when most places were cash only, and I couldn't get cash out because all the banks are closed, and so you find the one gas station that accepts credit cards, and then in line, and you can just hear people screaming at each other. And I'm like, this is not Iowa. We hide it in and then passive aggressively poison you later. We're not we don't like to confront. That's not who we are as a people. It's one of my favorite things about Iowans. Yes. Well, is it really civilized to repress your emotions? I don't know. But yeah, we're repressors, and that's fine, but people, yes. And I've heard this say over and over, people are just fed up in a way that is scary, and I hope we're able to channel that frustration towards voting and making our world a better place, because I also think, as bad as it is, that means we have a really incredible opportunity to pass some bold policies that we wouldn't have been able to do before. Let's get health care for everybody, and let's get some child care tax credits, and let's get I'm a little bit excited because I'm
yes,
we got to do this bold plan, we got to do this bold plan, and people are like, calm down. No. And I'm like, I will not, because there's never a better time to rebuild than in the ashes of a fire. So let's go.
Yes, we don't ever want to go back to that normal. That normal sucked. We have a once in a lifetime opportunity to do this the right way, and we're really optimistic about it too. We agree with everything you just said. We try to give actions at the end of all of our episodes to channel that, either whether it's anger or despair, into something useful. So yes, good. And I don't know, it helps me. I have a vote forward pile of letters that has 500 letters in it now, because that's how I've been pissed 500 times and needed something to do. So, channel your anger. That will, I say that's something that has been good, for me, is that being able to write and report stories that feel important, and I'm also an opinion columnist, so I can do things that maybe another journalist might not be able to. That feels like, it feels like I'm doing work, and then also being able to get out and volunteer in my community has been incredible. And if people are wondering how to help, the Catherine McCauley Center in Cedar Rapids has been doing incredible work with the immigrant population here in Cedar Rapids that are elected leaders just completely abandoned after the storm. So they're great. But there was a time right after the storm on Twitter where I texted my friend who's doing Meals on Wheels, and I was like, are y'all still delivering meals? What do you need? And she's like, yes, but we're struggling, and we've been struggling. And so I tweeted out okay, let's donate to Meals on Wheels. And then a ton of people did, and they got so many donations. And it was oh God, it feels so great to do something, right? To make the world a better place. And so, if all you can do is send a postcard or vote or donate to a food pantry or something like that, it actually it's the difference between somebody going hungry and somebody getting a meal, and that's not nothing.
Yeah.
Getting a meal and
sorry, I got on my soapbox a little bit.
I love it. Getting a meal and knowing that there are people out there that care whether they have a meal or not too.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, yes. I do believe the majority of people in America are not cruel, which is a bold thing to say in 2020, but I don't believe it. I can't believe it. But I do think we do a lot of cruel things out of self-protection. And, but just seeing the way people try to care for each other is really important. My neighbor he's a Trump lover, and he thinks the COVID is a conspiracy, and he has completely cleared my yard and pulled the tree off of my house and chopped up everything and made me a nice pile of firewood and brought me food when he had power back before me. So life is complicated.
Yes. Yeah.
And then he also had a giant party where nobody was wearing masks and there were 90-year-old women there. And anyway, so again, life is complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. Ugh. Kind of getting into something was actually pretty major in Iowa. Complicated. It's a great word for it, but just like a little piece of human rights I didn't think we would see from Kim Reynolds is the felon voting rights. Quick background for listeners. A couple weeks ago, Iowa was still the only state in the country that didn't allow felon or former felons to vote of any sort, like without a direct appeal to the governor. And then on August 5th, shortly before the derecho, some people convicted of a felony in Iowa now have had their right to vote restored after they've completed their sentence per an executive order from our governor, Kim Reynolds. So in Iowa, somewhere between 50 and 60,000 people are not allowed to vote due to a criminal history. Obviously, it's racially disproportionate because Iowa's in America, but the Black Lives Matter activists in Iowa have been on Kim Reynolds' ass about this for a while, and because she promised that this would happen. She promised they would do this in time for the November election. I'm kind of shocked that it did. I don't think that this gives her any like, oh, wow, we like you now. But at the same time, I know that there was a lot of activism happening for it in Des Moines, probably in other places as well. Not sure if there was a lot of calls to action happening in Cedar Rapids too, or things that you were able to see or cover.
Yes, I mean there were huge protests. I believe it was over 2,000 people came out for one march in particular, for an anti-racist protest in Cedar Rapids. I've never seen that happen before. We were debating is that the largest protest, but credit goes to the Des Moines Black Lives Matter protesters who were in the Capitol. And so the background on why Iowa was the last state in the nation to restore voting rights for felons is because, there was this like weird back and forth where Reynolds was like, she didn't want to sign an executive order because she wanted the lawmakers to do something and they didn't want to do something because she could have signed an executive order. And, with the clout she has with her caucus, and we are a Republican controlled state for now, that's a threat, but it was this political dickering that went back and forth, and while people moldered and were not able to exercise their rights, and this would have gone on. I absolutely believe this would have gone on unless but it took the protests and it took the Black Lives Matter activists showing up in the Capitol, going to her office, protesting. I mean, one of them got hit by a car, her car, Kim Reynolds' own car. I mean, in such a year, we keep forgetting that our governor hit a protester with her car and wasn't sorry. And didn't care. And then when she signed that bill, none of those protesters were allowed at the bill signing. And currently those protesters are being arrested by the Des Moines police. It is unconscionable what is happening. But if it were not for those activists, we would not have passed this essential piece, this essential restoration of rights. And we still need to encourage lawmakers to pass a bill so that this is not up to, to the whims of governors, because as we can see, we cannot trust elected leaders. So it's yes, and I think that there's an inclination, especially among well-meaning centrists, to say, "Oh, well, look, it's a win." It's not a win, because it's happening on the backs of protesters and activists who are now being rounded up and tossed into jail, and it's it's disgusting.
Yep.
I like to put, I think it helps me to put stuff in perspective, but with numbers, but like specifically what you guys are talking about with disenfranchised Iowans because of felony convictions, that's like 50 to 60,000 people just in Iowa. Like, as a reminder, Trump won Michigan by 10,000 votes. So like these are margins that matter very, very much. It's not a drop in the bucket. Like it matters very much.
Well, and it's also about a person's dignity, right? Like we have to let people vote. You have to let people have a voice. And when you systematically remove people's voices, that is the strongest form of oppression you can do in this country. And it happens over and over again. I mean, this isn't anything new. We did it, and I mean, I just wrote something about the 19th Amendment and had to remind myself of how systematically, even after we passed the 19th Amendment, how the voting rights of women of color and Asian women were just like taken away because of racist laws about IDs and literacy and all that kind of stuff. And we'd like to think we're better, but we're still struggling.
Yeah. So this is the second time that an Iowa governor has signed an executive order to allow people with felony convictions to vote. So as we know from last time, it takes more than an executive order that's actually going to make change permanent. It's a constitutional amendment that we really need. Are you optimistic that might actually happen?
No, I am not. And here's why. Because our current elected leaders, especially in the Iowa Republican Party, are acting very petty. And, I know there are bills they didn't pass just because they didn't want to give Democrats a win. Like, very specifically, there's this bill that would hold landlords and mobile homes accountable to some of their rent increases and evictions and everything like that. It was a bipartisan bill. It was a great bill. They wouldn't pass it because they didn't want to give Democrats a win. So people are not being rational. Like they're not, this is playing politics with people's lives. So no, I have absolutely no faith in the governing elected leaders at our Capitol right now. I think they're playing petty, stupid games because they think they have all the power. They think they will continue to have all the power. And if it doesn't affect them, then they don't care. And I know this sounds like really, I feel like I sound really mean. I do. I am being mean, but it is justified because of what is happening to people's lives right now, people's rights. And I think it's time we stopped playing nice, and started holding people accountable for their actions. Like, that is disgusting. That mobile home park bill should have been passed. The only reason it wasn't passed was because of petty differences, and playing politics with people's lives is unconscionable.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And like voting
Sorry.
rights is a basic recognition of our humanity. So we agree completely. And the history of voter disenfranchisement is the history of dehumanization of Americans. We started
Yes.
this country only allowing like white male property owners to vote, gradually expanded it to recognize humanity by class and then race and gender, but like with such big like buts in there, because it's like, oh yes,
Right.
women and people of color can vote, but they have to get through the poll taxes and the literacy tests and the literal threats to their safety. And
Yes.
it's so, yeah.
And now we have all these ID laws, and now our Republican legislators, were like saying that passed a law saying that the Secretary of State couldn't mail in ballot applications and put a bunch of restrictions on that. So, I mean, this is just a way to deny people their voice, and there are so many voiceless people in America, and that doesn't happen by accident. It's not just an oopsies. Like this is on purpose.
Yeah. Thinking about felon voter disenfranchisement as dehumanization as a powerful strategy in ignoring just like enormous problems in our society, it sort of makes me think of all the ways that like women and pregnant people are dehumanized, which you touched on in your book.
Hey, nice. That was a really great transition. I admire you.
Oh, thank you. Morgan wrote that. Morgan does just an excellent job with this podcast that I started by myself and then made her join me. But can you tell us a little bit about your book, Belabored? I guess I'll read the full title. It's called Belabored, A Vindication of the Rights of Pregnant Women, which I finished this morning. It was excellent, but I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about your book.
Yeah, so for those people just coming to it, it's part memoir. I put a lot of myself in there, a lot of my experiences as a mother, but it's also part manifesto. It's very deeply researched. I traveled around lots of places, read a lot of books about, just to try to understand how we got to this point in America where we have the highest maternal mortality rate in the developed nations, and and it's worse for women of color, and just as you start cutting down the demographic, parsing it out demographically, it just gets worse and worse for people. And so I really wanted to try to understand what it is in our culture and what it is in our medicine that makes it so we have to continually debate the rights of women to control and have autonomy over their own bodies. Like and especially in Iowa, every year our legislator passes these like completely unconstitutional laws that keep getting slapped down in the courts because they're like, hey, it's unconstitutional to put up these, like abortion bans, and then they defund Planned Parenthood. It's a game that we're still playing in 2020. And so I wanted to step back and talk about the big picture and say, how did we get here and how does it affect us? The defunding Planned Parenthood matters even if you're a wealthy white woman in the suburbs who's never been to Planned Parenthood, right? Because it's a part of a culture that systematically denies you your rights. It's like, and like women are in such a bind because you can never win, right? There's a quote in the book that I love from Alyssa Mastromonaco, who's wonderful and worked in the Obama administration. Yeah, she's great. And she's on the Syria podcast, and she's lovely. I got to interview her once when her book came out, and we just had this great talk. And one thing she said, she has in her most recent book, she talks about like not having children. And I was talking to her about that, and she just She was like, you're fucked whatever you do. If you choose to have kids, you're fucked because you lose out on money. You're expected to do more work. Like, and then every time your child has a problem, it's your fucking fault. Like, you know, everything you do with your body, like you can't drink caffeine. Oh my God, you had a glass of wine, sinner. Like, and then, I mean, and it's not just cultural choices, like women who have children and, you know, are more likely to be poor than women who don't.
Yep.
Right? Like, because we don't pay them as much. But men, once they become fathers, they actually earn more money. So it's not just cultural, it's systematic. And so she's like, yeah, so like if you have a child, you're screwed. And then if you don't have a child, then culture judges you as you're not like fulfilling your feminine identity. And, you know, like, and then you go to have a baby and it's like, well, if you do a medicated birth, then, oh my God, how dare you subvert nature. But then if you do like a natural childbirth, that's like, oh my God, then you're such a stupid hippie. How dare you? And like, you just like, we have set it up so women cannot win. And that's the game. And I think so many of us get our heads stuck down trying to win at a game that was designed for us to lose. And so that is, again, the point of the book, is to say, you know, kind of like slap our heads out of this game and say there's bigger things at stake here, and there's things that we can do to change this. So it does, I mean, I feel like it gets a little preachy, but I also make a lot of jokes in there, so it's a little fun, maybe.
Oh no, it was very fun. I loved reading it. I also, well, I have questions about it at the end, but
Yeah.
I also read Educated by Tara Westover, and when you said in your book that you got to like go meet her family and like her parents that she talks, I was like, oh my God, so that alone was like worth buying the book for me. But that was just like a very small part of like there's a lot of other very interesting, very funny, very poignant points. Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like that's a crazy, interesting chapter.
Yes.
And of course my book, I'll just say for people, like, my book came out August 11th. The storm hit August 10th. And so there have been a lot of things that I would normally do. And also we're in a pandemic. So there's a lot of things I normally do for book promotion that I just haven't been able to. But, you know, I was so excited because I think that chapter is good. And I like it, and I think it's interesting, and like, but like nobody has asked me about it.
Oh
People are just be like, I read your book, it was great, and I'm like, okay. Any other questions? Like, do you want to talk to me about the 3 days I spent at the Westover compound?
I do.
No? Okay, cool. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, I'm like, I want to hear about that, and I haven't even read the whole book yet because I am a slow reader because I don't get enough sleep at night. So every time I sit down to read, I fall asleep within like 4.5 pages and wake up 8 hours later.
I have been struggling to read. I have really been struggling to read, and I've been having a hard time just sitting and focusing, and like I'm so insufferable. Like the few books I have been able to finish are like books that I read before a long time ago, like The Master and Margarita, and I reread Unbearable Lightness of Being, and then, you know, and then I read some Toni Morrison, and I'm like, and I think maybe it's just like a comfort thing, maybe, but it's ridiculously hard to read right now. No, you're I mean,
same. I can reread something I've read 400 times, like the third Harry Potter book if I want to, but I can't I can't read anything new. I don't know. It's like my brain's protecting me. Like, no. This isn't the time for this yet.
I'll say the few new books that I have been able to read are that book. It's not that new, but it's in it won a bunch of awards, but very good. It's Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by that Polish writer. I am Polish. My maiden name is Baranowski. I'm not going to be able to say her last name, but that book just like pulled me in. And then my friend, I'm not just saying this because he's my friend, but Matthew Salesses, he's an Iowa writer. He published this novel, Doppelganger Disappear, and it pulls you in and is very smart and worth the read. So I think those are the two new books that I've been able to read for sure.
I'm going to have to add those to my list. So going back to Belabored, I feel like,
Yeah.
I know I definitely have a tendency to just constantly refer to everything women do as like badass or warriors, like all the time. And I mean, yes, like
I think
women
it's
are
cute that
fucking
you do that.
awesome and beautiful and tough as nails. Like I do that all the time. I'm just like, oh my God, she is the greatest. And I say that about at least 10 people a day, all of whom are women.
Good, you should.
But like,
Absolutely.
also like, we shouldn't have to be like warriors to give birth or to be a vice presidential candidate or like anything.
No.
But yet like we are, or like do, like for some reason have to like earn this warrior status in order to be recognized as humans worth
Yeah,
anything.
and I
like, ugh.
Yes, and that's one of the things I didn't want my book to do is I think there's so many motherhood women books out there that are just like self-help in a way that's like, oh, well, you just got to lean in. You just got to be a warrior. You just got to do this and tough it up, mama. And like, I want to take my book and slap all those other books in the face because you can't self-help your way out of a society that systemically oppresses you. And maybe instead of leaning in, you should look the fuck up and start passing some goddamn laws that give us mandated like paid maternity leave. Why are we the only developed nation without that? Here's why: because of like cultural biases. So like, yes, we shouldn't have to be, and women are expected to do all this. And it's worse for women of color. I saw a tweet the other day that was getting dunked on, and rightly so, because it was some man was like, oh, Black women are going to save America. And all I saw were Black women quote tweeting it and being like, we shouldn't have to save your ass. Also, you pay us less. Like, also, we're more likely to die in childbirth. And then you expect us to show up and save you? No. And that's the expectation on women. We're constantly forced to vote for candidates who have history of sexual assault, but we don't have any other choices, right? Like we are, Brett Kavanaugh is on the Supreme Court, right? Like that's the biggest fuck you to women I've ever seen. Yes. And I've seen a lot of fuck yous to women, right? Like that we have a society that does this, so you can lean in all you fucking want, but you need to start making America a better place for all women. And, like your kids are not going to be able to lean in. So just like, but it's easy. Like it's easy just to say, try harder rather than the whole system is messed up, right? Because that would take a reckoning of our complicity.
Right.
Which, I think a lot of the people who write those books aren't willing to do. They're not willing to sit down and say, okay, fine, I'm a wealthy white woman and I have 2 nannies. Yeah. And that's how I get it done. It's not trying harder. It's inherited generational wealth.
Right. Yep.
That's
the secret.
Yeah. Right. They're like, girl, wash your face. And I'm like, girl, let's have a conversation about systems of inequality.
Girl, kiss my ass. Yeah. Well, yours is smarter.
Okay. One of the parts that really resonated with me in your book is you talk about like learning about internalized misogyny, but like even, and like all these other like myths about womanhood, but like even as you're like explaining to people while they're like how they're wrong, like part of you still believes that they're true. Is that right? Am I like remembering correctly?
Yeah, so it's really, yes. I mean, I think that comes out a lot in the pain chapter where I was like, I'm one of 8 children. My mom, my parents, evangelical, homeschooled us. And my mom, after, I would say she's given birth enough times, she knows what she wants, but it had kind of come to this. I mean, we weren't vaccinated. We were like anti-vax before it was cool. And that caused a lot of problems, especially later when I went to graduate school. And I'm like, how many vaccinations have I had? And my mom was like, we don't know, figure it out. So I had to like go to the doctor and just get shot up with everything. Anyway, But you know, it's just like, it's so when and my youngest brother has Down syndrome and is severely immune compromised, and so, you know, I've kind of seen how science and medicine has been able to help him live a life, right? And so I like science and medicine. I'm very pro science. Metrics and data. That's my Kim Reynolds. That was a terrible Kim Reynolds, but that's it. But, you know, so I was very much like, when I went to give birth, I was like, yeah, I'm just going to do what the doctors tell me. I'm not going to fight this. Like, I'm not going to, why would I? We have like centuries of scientific progress. Like, why am I going to fight this? And then I went in to give birth and I felt dehumanized. I had a ton of postpartum hemorrhaging. I didn't even know what it was until I went to give birth to my second and was having nightmares. I was having PTSD-like nightmares about blood on the floor and dying and leaving my child, you know, my daughter at the time, alone, because I had no idea why I had bled so much and had such a tough recovery, and nobody told me anything. And it's not like because I wasn't asking, I was asking and being treated like a child. And I was so exhausted. I didn't know how to advocate for myself because I had just given myself over, you know, to the gods of medicine and trusted them, so that when I was let down, I felt like it was my fault. And a lot of people feel like that, you know. And so when I was researching that chapter, I went in kind of expecting to learn about the history of pain and pain medication during birth as like this liberating thing. But instead, what I learned was how wealthy white feminists advocated for twilight sleep and pain medication. And while it worked for some of them, what it ended up being used as was a way to dehumanize poor women, disabled women, women of color, forcibly sterilize them. And it has, and you know, dehumanizing the birth process. And so I got in being like, oh yeah, it's going to be an empowering story. And then reading it and being like, oh, shit's so much more complicated than I have fully grappled with. That, like, you know, a lot of the women in our history that we see as heroes were racist as hell, first of all. Low-key eugenicists, and, you know, not that great. And so I think that was one of the reasons I subtitled it The Vindication of the Rights of Pregnant Women, is because, you know, it's based on the vindication of the rights of women. And I wanted to call back, but I also wanted to move us forward, right? And say, we are resting our society on some pretty faulty premises. Let's do better here.
Yeah. And I mean, we think you're like an amazingly talented writer, and you've written a lot of really great stuff, including another book, which came out not even that long ago either, Godland. And that, I feel like, is also such a powerful mix of like memoir and also journalism, which I think is, I mean, really well done and just really powerful. I think it resonates with people. And maybe that's just because like I identified like, oh, wow, also grew up, you know, Midwest family, all that religion, you know, kind of Lutheranism tied in so much. And I don't know, like, but then, you know, you just write about so many really vulnerable topics like religion and politics and feminism and womanhood and the intersection of all of those things in a lot of the things that you've written, actually. And I think there's just so much authenticity in that. And maybe this is like kind of a hacky question, but how do you do that? Like, how do you find that balance and that authenticity?
It's really hard. I've been writing for a long time, and I initially I thought I was going to be a fiction writer. Like I was writing all these short stories, and I have written 2 novels that are terrible, but they're like what I used to go to MFA to get my MFA. And I love it when people sometimes try to use my MFA against me. They'll be like, oh, yeah, well, you have an MFA in fiction, so what do you know about writing? I'm like, you're right. I don't know anything. like you can't insult me more than I insult myself. Right. But the point of this story is I had this incredible this incredible mentor who was a writer from Trinidad. His name was Wayne Brown. He died my last year of MFA, but I remember him looking at me in the face and saying, "You write fiction because you're too afraid to tell the truth." And like, that's a hard thing to say to somebody, but it was like a necessary thing to say to me. And then after that, I thought, well, maybe I should try to tell the truth more. And there were a lot of truths I was too scared to tell, like, you know, truths about the history of sexual assault in my family, the truths about, you know, the way that, and I love my parents. And I don't, you know, I love my parents, but, you know, they did us a little dirty sometimes, as all parents do. And so, you know, there were some things there that, you know, I needed to talk about. There were some truths in my personal relationships I needed to talk about. And I was afraid to tell them. But as I slowly began to tell them, I started realizing, oh, it's not just me, right? Like, a lot of us have this, but what I can do is I can put a voice to it. And so it's been a long, slow process, and I won't say it hasn't had consequences. You know, I think there was about 2 years back in the early aughts when my parents did not talk to me. It also wrecked my marriage, as you'll see in Godland, and also probably a little in Belabored. But you know, but the more I say a true thing, the more I realize. Maybe I'll just tell a story that will help you understand how I can do it and how I've learned to do it. Was a part of my book, Belabored, talks about purity culture and how I had been assaulted in college, and I just kind of lived in denial about it because of my relationship at the time, and the world that I lived in did not allow for mistakes. And if I had admitted what had happened, my parents would have pulled me out of college. I wouldn't have gotten married. You know, and I had to, and I don't regret it, but I lived in denial for a long time. And so part of the book is me saying, no, this happened to me, and me owning it and talking about why I couldn't own it for so long. And that was an excerpt that was published before the book was published. And right before the book was published, I went into my wine shop, which is just this cute little store right up the street from me. And I went to go buy a bottle of champagne to celebrate my book. And the wine shop lady pulled me into a corner and started crying. And she said, I read that excerpt, and that happened to me too. And I haven't been able to talk about it with anybody. But you know what I mean? But like so it's so powerful. And that, I think, excerpt, you know, that was something I didn't even feel comfortable talking to my parents about. I didn't give my sisters a warning or a heads up. I should have. In hindsight, I should have warned my sisters at least. But I didn't have the emotional energy. But that's no excuse. But, you know, like, that was like something I was very scared to be vulnerable about. But I think that the more we can be true and honest about our lives with no pretense, the better we get at having true and necessary conversations that will make our world and our hearts better. I know that sounds cheesy, but I believe it.
No, I think you're totally right. That's very nice. I read that same excerpt. That's what made me want to read Belabored. And actually, for like a little bit, I was like, wait, this book's not out yet. Like, I was very upset. And then I was like, oh, okay, it comes out in 2 days. I'll be okay. Like, but yeah, I mean, I had like a very similar experience reading that article. And also, I didn't really grow up that religious, but I dated, actually yesterday, I think I told Morgan this, yesterday would have been my 5-year wedding anniversary, but I didn't get married. I called it off.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I know. And like, that guy's great. Like, he's fine. It's just, we're not supposed to get married. But he was super religious. And then right after dating him, I started dating somebody who grew up homeschool, evangelical, and just reading your books was so helpful because like I didn't grow up that way, but it was so helpful to see how like those two probably thought, and like it was just, I don't know, it was so useful. So just think like, and also I watched him, we dated during the 2016 election. So I watched him become a Trump supporter while we were dating. And like yes, so your book was like the closest thing to, nobody else that I've talked to has experienced that, like dating somebody who's becoming a Trump supporter in your relationship. And like I couldn't hate that guy more, you know? So it was like, oh my God.
It's hard to talk about.
Yeah.
I know when I finally started talking about my divorce, and I didn't for a very long time, and we have kids, you know, but when I finally was like out and the papers were filed and things were in motion, and I finally started saying, I think I published an essay in Glamour that was about how I'm not cooking anymore. And that was kind of, I feel so bad for my family obviously knew about it, and my friends did too, but like I feel so bad for people in my life who have to find out things because I published an essay in Glamour. But you know, like when I think that vaguely alluded to, you know, our political differences and everything. But I remember when that came out, there were so many women who hopped into my DMs and said, I am in a relationship with a man who is a Trump supporter and I don't know what to do. And, you know, I'd be like, well, you got a couple options.
Yeah.
And I think you should leave. And I don't say that lightly, because I think leaving is the hardest way out. People talk about leaving as the easy way out. Nope, it's hard as hell. It's easier to stay.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of women in America keeping their mouths closed because if they open them, if they speak their truth, it will burn down their entire lives. And that is a scary, scary thing. But I would love to tell them, burn down your life.
Yes.
It's okay. You're going to be fine. And actually, it's so much better, and the sex is way better on the other side. So just consider that.
Like hard second everything you just said. It'll be hard for a little bit, but it's so much better and like more authentic on the other side. It's just do it.
It's a harder, more vulnerable life to lead. But it's more beautiful. I think there's this, I keep listening to the Chicks Gaslighter album.
Oh,
and
my
the
goodness.
song that wrecks me, I know, right? And the song that wrecks me every time, well, different songs wreck me at different days, right? Depending what mood I am. The song that wrecked me today while I was cleaning and listening to it, was For Her, where it talks about like showing up for yourself and still being vulnerable, even though you've had like a lot of bad things and like life has been tough. But like it's truly an act of courage and hope to continue to be open and vulnerable. And I broke up with somebody in the pandemic, and we'd been dating for like 10 months, and the reasons aren't necessary, but also, you know, I just needed a man who could show up and see beyond his own feelings, you know, and that wasn't that relationship. But I remember telling that to my friend, who really liked him, and she was like, there's no bigger sign of hope than breaking up with somebody in the pandemic, because that means you really think that the world can be better. And I was like, the way you put it sounds depressing, but you're also not wrong. But yes, and so I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but yes, to whatever you said. We were encouraging women to divorce. That's right. We're encouraging women to divorce more and to break up more. And that's one message I feel like we should give to your audience. That's the action they can take when they leave.
That's an important one.
Conversation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Start with that one. If you're in a relationship with a Trump supporter, you know what? Like, the other actions are great, but that would probably go a long way.
I mean, even if they're not a Trump supporter, even if they're just like libertarian or something, it's still fine.
Regular Republican.
From personal experience, can confer.
Yes.
Do not. Oh, I know. And I mean, like, also, like, we're in the Midwest. Like, our options are so limited.
Yes.
But, like,
So
let me
true.
tell you. Like, let me tell you. No, nobody who's pro Project Lincoln gets your vagina. No libertarians get your vagina. It's 2020. We have standards. And
Yeah.
if you need help, I have, like, a really great vibrator recommendation. We're going to get through this. We're going to be fine. But don't start giving these subpar idiots access to your vagina.
Yes.
Do
And
better.
like girls out and women and other out there listening, if you are like, well, this isn't me, but this is a friend, this could apply to a friend, let them know they can come stay with you as long as they need to, because sometimes that's all they
Yes.
need to actually leave him
Mhm.
is just somebody to say, hey, you can stay at my place until you get back on your feet. Women
Well, if
supporting
we're
women.
going to be honest, yeah, what it took for me to leave my marriage was I had no access to our shared money. I didn't know that wasn't okay. I'm like 30, what was I at the time? 34? I don't even know. I was like, "Oh, wait, I can't access our money. Oh, wait, like I can't do anything." And then I finally was just honest with some friends about that, and they were like, "Hey, that's wrong."
Mhm.
And we're going to help you set up a separate bank account, and we're going to help you get out, and here's how you're going to put money in there, and here's how you leave, and it took good friends, helping. And otherwise I didn't know, cause like I had to move out.
Yeah.
But anyway, but like, yes, being honest with your friends about the heavy truths of your life is so necessary. Every time I have these two friends who I've been friends with since college, and every time, I tell them something, they've never phased. They're always like, yeah, okay, great. This is like what friendship is for. We're so happy you told us because we want to show up for you. And that's why I love women, and I think we're rad warriors, even though we shouldn't have to be.
Yes.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Okay, we love ray gun, of course. And
Yes.
ray gun,
I love ray guns so much.
yeah, they have never failed in, like, I don't know, they nail it every time. And of course, ray
No,
gun,
but they have.
go ahead, sorry.
But can I just say my goal in life? My number one goal in life. This is it. I only have one goal in this world of sin, is to get something I say on a ray gun t-shirt.
Oh my gosh, that's a great goal. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's pretty obtainable too. Like, you say great stuff, you're from Iowa. Like, I don't know, let's make it happen.
I know. That's what I feel like I feel like there have been some real good ones.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
like
definitely.
it just hasn't been good enough. I gotta try harder. I gotta do better.
Let's
I gotta
start a
bring my A
change.org
game.
petition
Yeah.
and see if that helps.
Well, we would have to get something that I said like that was good.
Yeah. Well, we'll discuss. We'll pick a quote after and see.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we'll brainstorm.
We'll create a bunch of like Twitter bots and just keep tweeting it
Sure.
until it's like so viral that they can't ignore it.
We'll make it a QAnon conspiracy and we'll go mainstream.
That is we're recording this on August 23rd, which is a Sunday. Our QAnon episode drops tomorrow. So that's very timely.
Yes, it's perfect.
But so Reagan talks about, America's need for journalists, and but do you want to like elaborate on that? And like, you talked about how you are a journalist in local media. Do you want to talk about how like important that is specifically right now?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's talk. Great setup. So I'm going to tell a story. Two things is, back in 2018, I was a struggling single mother, freelancing and looking for a job so I could have health care. And I applied to a couple places, got a couple interviews, and it came down to a choice between a national place where, I'd have to do a lot of travel, or the Cedar Rapids Gazette. And for so long, I've lived in Cedar Rapids and been part of this community, but I've never been part of the local journalism community. And one thing that I really believe in is, if you're going to go around and talk about shit, then you should do it, right? Like, if you're going to sit around and complain about the local newspaper or something, then try to make it better, right? Like, don't just sit around and crap on things. And so I was like, oh my God, here's this opportunity where I could live and work in my community and maybe make a difference. And so I took the job. Flash forward to August 10th. And I will say, we had the caucuses, and then we've had this pandemic, and seeing people work in it has been incredible. But here's the reason local journalists are important, is because on August 10th, these winds blow up, and I'm so sorry, meteorologist, without warning. This morning, a meteorologist was trying to tell me there was warning, and I was like, sir, there was no warning. It was a severe thunderstorm alert. Please do not. That's not a severe thunderstorm. That was a Category 2 fucking hurricane. They're very different things.
Yeah.
And, but God bless the meteorologists. I'm not trying to blame them. But this blows through, power's out, trees are down. Our mayor was complaining that he couldn't leave his house to do his job. Do you know who left their house to do their job? All the journalists in town. We had a photojournalist who was driving back, was on the side of 380. He stopped to help semi drivers who had been blown over off the road from the wind. He stopped to help them and only took pictures after he knew everybody was okay, right? And he did this not once but twice. So he's not only doing his job, he's being a good human and a good neighbor first, and then taking pictures. Our other, photojournalist, Liz Martin, was kind of in a similar situation. Her car got wrecked, and she had to walk home, and she doesn't know where Andy is, and obviously she cares about him, but, she doesn't know how her house is, but she's still taking pictures and still doing her job. Right, local TV journalist Beth Malicki literally climbed over trees, to get out to a main road where she had a friend waiting to pick her up, because we know that these are our friends and neighbors, and in an emergency, you need good information and the best information, and that is our job. And nothing stopped them. Not only did the Gazette turn out one paper on Tuesday morning, which was sitting on my stoop Tuesday morning. Wow. There's trees. There's half a fucking tree in my yard. I can barely get out of my driveway, which I actually had flagged down a roving crew of men with chainsaws because it's Iowa, and had them help clear my driveway, because I knew I needed to get to internet, because I had stories to file. So I just threw my kids and some clothes in the car, flagged down a roving gang of chainsawed men, and had them help me get out. And I got out and headed straight up to Cedar Falls, which is an hour north, just because that was the closest place I could find with internet, and you know what I mean? So we got the job done in a way that, I am just going to be real blunt, our local elected officials did not. Yeah. If I have to hear one more wealthy white man in power in this town complaining about, well, it was just really hard, to feed people or clothe people or set up shelters because my own house had a tree on it, I will lose my mind. Yeah. Because, that didn't stop people in this community from helping each other, and that didn't stop the journalists from doing their jobs. And so that's why local journalism is important, because in a time when your internet's knocked out, when your cell phone's knocked out, when your power's knocked out, that newspaper is still going to be on your front porch telling you where to go for help, or it's going to be on your neighbor's front porch, and that information is still going to be there. And that's why local journalism is so important. And we talk a lot about, people do a lot of news on Facebook, or, oh, I don't want to subscribe, it costs so much money. Subscribe to the digital edition, do what you have to do. It is so vital and so necessary for our democracy. You know, if it wasn't for local journalism and, you know, local whistleblowers, we wouldn't know about the Kim Reynolds quote unquote data glitch where they were hiding positivity numbers.
Yep.
Right? Like we wouldn't, if we didn't have Ryan Foley at the AP, we wouldn't know that the state was lying, straight up lying to us about infections at meatpacking plants. So if you believe in truth and transparency, then stop shitting on journalists. I mean, I know they kind of suck, but most of the ones that suck work for cable TV. Like the ones in your community who live here and are doing the work, like seriously, it's not fake news. You should see the fact checking I have to go through, even for a fucking opinion column. So just like, please, like, and nothing, I think nothing illustrates the need for journalism more than the fact that, you know, that, and I'm so proud to be part of that paper and to see the work they're doing and still doing, because, you know, we're still in a pandemic and we will be recovering from the storm for years to come. And we'll still be here and we'll still be doing the work. So the very least you can do is subscribe. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, that's so important though. And I feel like between the pandemic and the storm and Kim Reynolds' driving record, without journalists, there would be no accountability. And that's so important because we, the public, deserve that. And yeah, I'm here for it. Yeah, everybody subscribe.
It's easy to forget. I mean, I feel like the column that I turned in right after the storm hit, I think it was called like the summer of the primal scream or something. And, you know, it's just like all these things like, dude, how did we suddenly forget that Kim Reynolds hit a protester with her car? How did we suddenly forget that, like, Donald Trump said Padati was going to be on his coronavirus response task and everybody went around patting each other on the back and then they were like, LOL, no, just kidding, he was joking. And then she stopped showing up to and then she stopped showing up to press conferences right after that for like a couple of weeks. And like, we're all just supposed to forget about it. And it's easy to forget about, but not for me, because I've got a long memory and a petty heart and I'm here to constantly remind people.
Yes.
I've never thought about it before, but being petty is like, it can be an asset. Like I think I have a petty heart and, you know, I don't know. I'm going to reframe it. Sometimes it can be useful.
Yes. And I say petty to be glib and funny, but I actually don't think remembering the things that people do to actively harm or cover up is petty. I think that's our job, is to remember and to hold people accountable for it. But like, no, I'm so petty. Like there was in college, this dude like spilled orange juice on me kind of on purpose. Like he just like bumped into me and dumped and like orange juice just fell all over me. And he goes, sorry, and walked away. And then, oh my gosh, I sound like a sociopath, but like 10 years later, I was working at this literary magazine where I was the managing editor, and we get this submission for a poetry, like somebody wants us to review their poetry book, and it's the same guy. It's Orange Juice Boy. And I hadn't thought of him in years, but immediately when I saw that name, I was like, it's Orange Juice Boy. I told everybody. And then we didn't review his poetry.
Did you just like send him an email that just was like, we did not review your poetry? Sorry.
No, I said when I told the story at the team meeting, I said, this should not have any bearing on whether we cover his book of poetry or not. But I think you should all know that this asshole dumped orange juice on me. And then we didn't. And I think he just got a form rejection, which is actually the best kind, you know, because it's so cold. And so I'm just saying, like, to the kid who dumped milk on my head on purpose in high school, your day is still coming, and I will find you and I will get you.
Yep, we're here for it. We are here for it. Oh. So a few more just kind of fun questions before we wrap up. It wouldn't be a political-based podcast without us bringing up Joe Biden. So we were Team Warren all the way until that wasn't an option anymore. So obviously we were not very thrilled when Biden became the nominee. We coped, we drank, and recorded an episode talking shit about Biden. How are you feeling about him right now? Does it help or hurt that he has once called you a sweetheart?
I think I think there's a certain amount of gaslighting that we do to women in this culture, where when people in power treat you poorly, you're just expected to forget it and move on. And I will say that it wasn't just that he called me a sweetheart. It was that his team afterwards called and complained about me to every single person, saying that I was unprofessional and you know, and it was a really rough couple weeks after that, not just because of that small moment, but because of all then the gaslighting that happened after. And through that, I will say I kind of made a friendship with the writer and journalist Rebecca Traister, who's incredible and has written about Biden's quote unquote gaffes.
Yes.
And talked about how women, you know, when you constantly put forward, you know, candidates that demean women but are supposed to also be the savior of women, and it's not just about, it's about, you know, it's about a power imbalance too, you know. And in any case, look, this is what I'll say to your readers, because that incident was real. I was finishing Belabored, and the hate, I got bomb threats. I had to hide in my home and have like people manage my social media for me for days. And you know, it was truly horrifying. So what I will say is I will absolutely vote for Joe Biden because he is not Donald Trump. And we have to stop people from dying, and we need to get Trump out of the White House. But if you don't think for the next 4 fucking years I'm going to be holding him to a really high standard and using everything in my power to demand better for women in America, then you're wrong. I will not just vote and shut up, which is what we have expected women, Black women, everybody in this country to do for so long. I will vote, but I will not shut up. And so that's what I'll say. I'm like, I hope, I know his team's been working hard to build coalitions with the Bernie people, with the Warren people. I know Harris is now his vice presidential nominee. I hope that speaks to the bold policies that I hope he will be putting forward. And, you know, I hope he'll start doing some of Warren's plans. I hope he'll start making, you know, he'll start doing Sanders's Medicare for All. And that, there's that. But I do think it is ridiculous that, again, people just forget so easily, because to remember is to have a more complicated narrative than I think we're ready to grapple with. Yep. And our culture is still so deeply misogynistic. So
yeah, and I feel like when women call, especially powerful white men, out on their bullshit like that, people act like you're doing something cruel or mean by like shaming them, when it's like, no, it's accountability. I'm not going to shut up because there's accountability. Yes. And it's
also,
just,
he's
so
the one who has all the power. Like, he's the one who has all the power. He is the one who has all the power, and he's the one who whispered to me as we walked off stage, "You're a sweetheart." Like, that's, like, I didn't do that. I asked a question. By the way, all my questions for that forum were vetted by a team of over 20 people, an incredibly diverse team of like multiple partners, and everybody had seen that question before, and the candidates had not fully seen the questions but had been told, here's what we're going to be talking about, here's what we will be asking you about. So it's not like, you know, this was a surprise to them, but, you know, to then take that situation, I don't know. Like I said, I'll vote for him, but the next 4 years, we're going to raise some hell. Right,
For sure.
ladies?
For
Yep.
sure. I mean,
yeah.
this podcast is not going away after November. I mean, possibly we'll get to cover topics that are like less terrifying than like authoritarianism, but like there will be plenty of work to do for whether, you know, Biden and Harris are in the office too.
Yes, and again, I hope with my whole heart, but I also hold on and hold people accountable. So I think that's the best way to live.
I love it.
Okay, what else? I feel like we've already taken up like an hour and a half of your time. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
Oh, has it been that long?
Yes. I mean,
it's gone so fast.
Well, I'm having so much fun. What else do
No, I feel like you're just letting me rant, and I'm just ranting, and I'm like, and one more thing.
We love it.
It's usually us ranting, so it's great.
Well, my therapist texted me the other day to check in because of the storm, and she was also like, I saw some of your tweets. Are you doing okay? I was like, no, I am not doing okay. But yeah.
That's so funny. Okay, I want to make sure I do, like, you got to meet like Tara Westover's brother Sean, the like abusive one, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, did you had dinner with them? Can you just like tell me what he was like, or anything that you'd like to share about that?
And, you know, it was so crazy because, you know, I had reached out to them and said, I would like to write a story about you. But if you say no, I'll never contact you again. Mm-hmm. And I didn't hear anything. So the magazine I was going to write that story for was like, okay, we moved on to another story. And then I ended up hearing back from their family lawyer, who's actually just a guy with a law degree who owns the next ranch over. And he was like, what do you want? You know, what do you want to talk to them about? And I was just really honest. I was like, I want to see the oil business. I want to understand her life as a midwife. I think it's an interesting, you know, nexus of religion and birth and motherhood. And I want to talk to her. And so then I get called again the next day and they're like, great, when can you get here? Oh. And so I didn't have a magazine footing the bill or anything. So I just put it on my credit card. I bought a plane ticket. I went out there and I was told, when you come out here, we're not talking about Tara. Not at all. And don't ask. And I didn't promise, because as a journalist, I never promise never to ask a question. Also, if you tell me not to ask a question, I'm immediately going to ask a question. But I went out there and, you know, it's this big kind of compound in the mountains and it's beautiful, but it's also very isolated. And there's like part of the home, it's all like self-built. It's like very like, it's like part warehouse, part oil place. And I'm just building it all up to say, you know, that like they, you know, I was praying with them. I was watching like Mormon programming with them. They were, you know, we were living together for 2 days, 3 nights. Yeah, because I left that. Was it 3 nights? Oh God, it's hard to remember. But the whole time I'm sitting and talking with the mother and the father, although the father got kicked out of our conversations because he started getting a little nutso about like Jewish conspiracies and vaccines. And but I was sitting there, and the whole time siblings are just like going in and out because they work in this essential oils business, and, you know, are very much a part. It's like, you know, it's a family run business. So they're all going in and out and in and out and in and out. And then there was the one brother who would come in, he would like look at me and then leave. And, you know, it was like, and then, you know, that his children were there and, you know, they showed me around. And then by the last night, they had all decided that I was good enough that we would go out and have some Mexican food. But it was a really really crazy because he never spoke directly to me. Like, he'd talk to others, like he would tell his son, oh, tell that writer lady your joke, or, you know, tell her this thing. But like never spoke. Like, one time a kid, this is not in the essay, but like a kid spilled water everywhere, and I was like helping to get, like, it also like all over my lap, but like I'm a mom, like I don't even give a shit. And but like, you know, I'm just like trying to help him wipe it up, and I'm asking him, I'm like, do you need more like napkins over there? And he just like looked at me and then just didn't reply. And I was like, oh my God, this is so, yeah, that's kind of what it was like. It was so, and I understand, like, I guess I have a family, and that's part of the essay, is that I have a family where there is an abuse story that we also don't talk about. And, you know, and who gets to tell our stories, and who gets to create our creation myths, and who doesn't, and who gets a voice and who doesn't, is also part, I think, a more important part of that essay to me than the actual midwifery. But yeah, it was a very intense couple of days. I remember coming out, and I left very early that next morning, that morning of my flight. Like, I didn't stay. Like, there was one, you know, like I could have slept longer, but I hadn't been able to sleep. There's also no caffeine, so I hadn't had like coffee in days, and hadn't been able to sleep because it was just really tense the whole time. And so I just remember waking up early and just being like, I'm just going to drive to the airport. Like, I don't care. It's like, you know, it's like 4 a.m. I don't give a shit. I'm going. And I had the truck I rented. And when I got to the airport, it was this tiny little airport. And I just like sat down and started texting friends, because I hadn't been able to text them because of where I was. It was so remote. My texts weren't going through, and the Wi-Fi wasn't working. So I was basically like off the grid. And I just started texting people, yeah, I'm okay. And I got like a big cup of coffee and just started crying because it's really intense to see. Yeah, to see. I think, you know, again, the way we handle the stories of women is, on every level, is very complicated, and it's very difficult. And going into that world was tough. And, you know, it's yeah. I'm glad I did it, but I also won't go back. Not that I don't think they'll have me back. Yeah. But I also, like, I actually afterwards, this newspaper, or this, after I came back, I told a friend who edits for The Guardian, I was like, okay, well, here's the experience. I think it would be really interesting to write about. And she goes, yeah, write about it, but like make it an essential oil story. And I was like, this is not an essential oil story. Like, the New Yorker had just published this big article on essential oils. And I was like, I think this is just like, I think if you let me write this as an essay, I think it'd be really good. She's like, no. And then I had her halfway convinced. But then she wanted to send a photographer out to the compound, and they were like, no, you only get to send a photographer out here if we get to read Liz's story first and approve it first. And I was like, oh, well, that's a non-starter. Like, you don't get to like invite me out, speak on the record, and then try to control what I say, which I think again speaks to the themes of the story. But yeah, it was really intense. And a friend of mine Venmo'd me money so I could buy more coffee and magazines. And I think for like the next couple days, all I did was like read like trashy magazines and drink coffee and just try to like get my mind
return
to a healthier place.
Yeah. That's like the right kind of detox after that situation. Forget the essential oils, like coffee and trash magazines. Yeah.
I mean, I just need every kind of legal addictive stimulant, whether it's a story about Chrissy Teigen's new baby, yay for her, yeah. Or, you know, just mainlining coffee and whiskey. I feel like that's the only way to live life.
We don't judge coping skills during normal times, and we definitely don't judge them during a pandemic.
It's just very true.
Oh my gosh. We're all so tired. We're all so stressed from all of this. Good Lord, we all need just like a vacation where we can all just like go to a concert and drink beer together.
Yes, and then like 2 days to recover and rehydrate at least.
Yes,
And
yes,
then, yes.
at least. But a lot of brunches, like, and then we're going to like hangover brunch after to like talk about our feelings. That's the thing I miss. I think one of the things I miss the most is like brunch with friends on a Sunday or a Saturday, where you just kind of show up in your shitty clothes and your sunglasses and you drink Bloody Marys and then you just talk shit. I miss that.
Yeah.
That does sound very nice. Maybe in another year.
Doesn't it? Okay. Okay, we'll do it. We'll go. I'll come have brunch with you guys.
Oh,
I
we'll
just
come
invited
to you.
myself.
We will so happily come to you.
True.
Morgan lives in Des Moines. I live in Chicago, and I happily travel to Iowa. So, oh my gosh, that would like make our year if that was a thing.
Okay. All right, put it in the calendar 1 year from now.
Oh,
Hopefully we'll have
I
a
will.
vaccine.
Perfect.
The day after
We'll make it
what would have
happen.
been my 6-year wedding anniversary, we're going to brunch with Lyz Lenz. The dream.
Well, I feel like you could do better, but all
I
right.
disagree.
All right, I accept.
Yeah. I
disagree.
I have one last like kind of hard question, and then I'm gonna stop talking because I think Morgan has like another question. But I've thought about doing an episode about Waco and Ruby Ridge, but I don't want to. It's complicated, and I don't.
Yeah.
It's like, can you like summarize like how those, like what those events kind of were, and like how they radicalized some Christians? Like I learned about it reading Tara Westover's book Educated, which people should read, and then they should read your book about her parents and their essential oil business. But like I don't know. I learned a lot about Waco and Ruby Ridge from that. But can you talk about like what effect that had on like that community?
There is an amazing podcast that I would recommend that people listen to. Somebody with a computer, Google this real quick, and it's the one. It's the one about. You know what? It's the one where she goes and talks to the people who did the standoff in the, that building. Oh God, I can't remember anybody's names right now. Anyway, the whole point being is that would be a great place for like people to sit and kind of really understand. But I'll tell you this, I grew up again in Dallas, Texas, right, not too far from Waco. I was a sheltered evangelical child. I never watched the news. Waco was the first news story I remember seeing at a friend's house. I was supposed to be asleep. My parents were out. We were being babysat. My poor parents have like a million children and never get a night out. Mm-hmm. And so I remember crawling into this room and watching, the compound go up in flames and not understanding what's happening. And then, and then hearing adults talk about it. And so how I had grown up knowing Waco was that the government was actively suppressing people for their religious beliefs. And that was what I heard talked about at churches. That's what I heard preached in sermons. And they would say, look at what our government did at Waco. Look at what they did at Ruby Ridge. They're coming for you next. And I remember talking about this with an editor one time for a piece I wrote, and him saying like, oh, but like Waco was a cult. And I was like, that's not how religious fundamentalists see it. They see one attack on religion or, a purported religion and extrapolate it to the whole. And so Waco and Ruby Ridge kind of became like, remember the Alamo for a whole new different generation of like, remember this happened. And I will tell you, when I left that place, I was like, oh, oh, well, clearly what I grew up with was wrong. Clearly how I understand it was wrong. The government had every right. They had guns. Everything was fine. And then, and then I start, and then as an adult, I start reading into it and realizing, oh, no, actually our government fucked up big time and killed women and children. And so I think it's one of those narratives that's deeply complicated because it's not like, again, like America, or like even when I was saying about pain, it's not one way or the other, right? Like they weren't just like an evil gunslinging cult. They were a little bit, but that doesn't mean women and children deserve to get killed, and our government did overreach. They did. And so like all things can be true in these very messy situations, but what happens is these stories then become a palimpsest or things that we write over them. So when we look at them, they become the thing we want to see, and there's so many reasons, good reasons people do not trust the government, like there are the Tuskegee experiments that our own government did on people. Like there's the nuclear explosions out in the West where like people got cancer and the government was like, it's fine, don't worry about it. Like, and so I think whenever we have these conversations about why people distrust the government, or, why people are like separatist militias, like we need to be less skeptical and less dismissive, and even stop fetishizing those stories, right? Because we fetishize them in such a weird way in our culture. But like we need to understand like that, people go to essential oils or go to start distrusting the government for good fucking reason. Because women go to the doctor and they say, I am in pain. And the doctor says, you're fine. And then later she finds out she has endometriosis. Like there are good fucking reasons we don't trust the establishment. And instead of saying the answer is not, well, trust science, trust the establishment. No, the answer needs to be, we need to have a reckoning with these systems and understand how culture plays a part, and understand how the history of medicine means people don't trust medicine. I mean, that story of Henrietta Lacks, having her cells taken without her permission and her family not even knowing. And, that's the story of medicine, is the story of the brutalization of not just women's bodies, but Black women's bodies. The only reason we know how to fix a fistula is because doctors experimented on slave women without medication. And there is a better way. There has to be a better way. And so I think Ruby Ridge and Waco ties all into that, because they become these counter narratives to when, you say, I'll just take the fucking vaccine, which please do take the vaccine. But also you have to understand that our government, our medical establishment has fundamentally failed people for centuries. And until we adequately begin addressing those other narratives, we're not going to solve this problem in America. So yeah, Waco is crazy. There's a really great Netflix documentary.
Oh.
And maybe if I can remember the name of that podcast, I'll
Waco
send it to you
Podcast?
and then you can recommend it.
Or is it End of Days? I know that was another one, but I think that was BBC.
No, there's because this was about the people who did the standoff at the federal building out in was that Montana? So I'll find out. I'll send it to you. It's really good. It does talk about Ruby Ridge and Waco, but it also talks about but in like a really relevant kind of a way. But yes.
Cool. I would love to learn more about that.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
we love to recommend actions. So obviously this week we're just telling everyone to go buy your books, Godland and Belabored, and to subscribe to their local journalism. Also, everybody should follow you on Twitter because you're the best. And break up with their boyfriends or divorce their husbands who are Trump supporting or just generally gaslighting assholes.
Yeah, break up with him, divorce him. That's an act of resistance.
Yep. Well, if you need DM us,
subscribe
if you need
to your
help.
local paper.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then each
absolutely.
interview we do, we also like to ask for suggestions on like causes or on organizations to donate to for each week. Do you have organizations or an organization you'd like to pick? It can be disaster relief related. It can be political. It can be whatever. It can be local.
I will say there's two places. Yeah, there's two places that I would encourage people to support. And the one is that I mentioned earlier, the Catherine McCauley Center, which is currently housing and feeding and clothing refugees who had their literal homes blown off around them and then were abandoned by our city leaders to live in tents for days without food, water, or help in any way. So Catherine McCauley Center shows up. They're there. They deserve our support. And they do just this incredible work with invisible populations here in Cedar Rapids. The other that I would encourage people to donate to would deal more with like reproductive rights. But right now in Iowa, there is the Black Women's Maternal Health Collective. If you Google that, you should be able to find their website. They are just getting started. They were supposed to have a big conference that was canceled because of the pandemic. They put it online, but they are working to advocate for reproductive justice for Black women in this state specifically, but as we all know, it's all intersectional, and that if we can get, people freed, that it frees everybody else. So they're doing incredible work, and so I highly recommend those two places, and it's very important work.
Awesome. We love it. And we'll make sure we put links to both of those in our social media when the episode goes up.
Yeah.
Yay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, we don't want to take any more of your time, although we certainly also would because this has been a blast.
Much fun. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me rant. It's very cathartic. I guess I owe you guys $150 an hour now because that's what I pay my therapist. So.
That's okay. Just one brunch 1 year from now.
Okay. When there's brunch 1 year from now. I'm not even kidding. I'm going to put it in my calendar.
Aww,
and then I'll set it to remind me the week before.
Perfect.
And then hopefully we have a Biden administration and a vaccine by then.
Oh my gosh, what a fun thing to look forward to.
Oh, that sounds like utopic at this point.
Yes. I love it.
I know, right?
Oh,
okay. All right. Let's make it happen.
Wait.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for your work, and thank you for shouting into the void. It's very important.
Thank you.
Thank you
too.
so much. Seriously.
All right.
All right.
How do we
I'm going to go. I got to cook up some tomatoes.
All right.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
Liz.
one.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much for listening to For Your Misinformation. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast, and if you like it, give us a rating and a review. It helps us find more listeners, and the more of us there are, the better.
And make sure you're following along on Instagram and Twitter at FYMI Pod.
Shout out to Kyle Dibdahl for the intro and outro music, Hope Dye for the podcast art, and Ben Schlofelt for the audio production.
We come out with new episodes every Monday.